Hi, good morning. My name is Lorraine. I'm co-chair of the forum committee with Mark, our computer technician. And we're very glad that you're here today. I know some of you are here by special invitation by Bob and Bonnie, so that's wonderful. So thank you. We have a service that's ending soon, and there'll be some people popping up too. So it's kind of an ebb and flow here for people coming and going. There's coffee and tea in the hall, so help yourself to that and welcome. Today our topic is Bobby Fischer, Genius and Madness. And our speaker is Bob Bruch, who I know as a neighbor and some guy that hangs out with a bunch of other guys at the club table coffee shop playing chess. So that's where I know them from, and Bonnie too was a partner with me in the River West Elders. So we go back. And speaking of going back, December 1st, 50 years ago, Bonnie and Bob were married here at First Unitarian Church. So yeah, well, we welcome them back, and that's wonderful. I will just invite Bob over, and you can tell us about your.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone enjoyed their extra hour of sleep. I was so worried that I'd get here an hour early or late today, but I think I came at the right time. Today I'm speaking about Bobby Fischer, the US champion and the world chess champion. And I'm a chess player, and to me, he's the greatest chess player that ever lived. His games are sparkling, brilliant, refined. And we have a dualism here, because like the topic says, the genius and madness, in chess, he was a genius. In terms of his character and his emotional life, it was a complete mess. So when people talk about Bobby Fischer, they make a dualism. You say, I really love that guy's chess playing, but he was a terrible person. And it reminds me of that movie Amadeus about Mozart, where people in the movie would say, what an obnoxious young guy he is. He likes bathroom humor, and he's just disgusting, but what beautiful music he makes. And this is the story of Bobby Fischer, somebody who is, brilliant in the chess playing, but in all other areas of life, complete disaster. Let me start by asking, do we have any chess players here? People don't want to even admit it. Okay, I'll ask you, what do you like about Bobby Fischer's games?
What I like about his games is the tenacity, the purpose in which you play chess is just persistence.
Well,
in his games.
Thank you for that, Al. I wasn't expecting that answer, and I didn't coach him. That's
for the people who are watching.
Could you just summarize that quick?
Yeah, summarize whatever
Because you
people
have the
say,
microphone.
because it doesn't get.
Maybe you should push that a little closer.
Oh, should I move back a little bit?
Well,
No,
no, they
they
all
can't
the
hear
jobs
the
the audience.
So he asked, what was your question?
He asked what I like about Bobby Fischer's chess playing, and I thought that the outstanding qualities were his tenacity in play and his persistence and pursuing the.
So if anyone asks me a question, I'll repeat it.
Thank you.
But that was the right answer. I think when history is done and we look at all the world chess championships and we evaluate them all, some of them are known for being great attacking players. Some of the world chess champions have been great defenders. Some have been great, opening theorists. But Bobby Fischer will be known for his tenacity. He was the super competitor. He wanted to win every single game. In the world of chess masters, if two grandmasters play a match, one will win one game, the other guy will win 2 games, and the rest will be draws. When Bobby Fischer plays, he wins every game, or tries to. Even the games that he loses because he's trying to win when he's in no position to win. He is just the super competitive. They tell a story that a lot of the chess masters, they realized that Bobby Fischer was a damaged person. And they said, maybe we can get him to a psychiatrist and try to fix him. And they thought, and finally they said no. They said it would be a terrible mistake to send him to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist would make him normal. Once he became normal, where would his motivation come from? To beat people, destroy people. So nobody ever really got Bobby Fischer to a psychiatrist. So anything we say today, in terms of what his psychological makeup is, it's just us playing pop psychology. Nobody has any clinical information about anybody who ever treated him or been with him. From that, we can also glean that he was a bit paranoid, especially seeing doctors, and his life ended early because of this refusal to see doctors. So paranoia was one of his problems. Many people think that he probably was autistic because he was so good at this game that's contained in these squares, 64 squares, but he was not very good with mixing with people. He really had no friends. Everybody admired him because he was the world chess championship in brilliant, and everyone treated him with kid gloves, that this is our Bobby Fischer. But nobody really was allowed to come close to him. And especially when he got old and he died, it was a very lonely death. But I think people put up with him because they felt they were surrounded by greatness. And so that's a good thing. I want to talk a little bit about maybe a strange topic. I always felt a certain connection with Bobby Fischer that maybe I felt that other people didn't have. One obviously was our names. We were both Bobs. One was our date of birth. I was born March 10th, 1945, and he was born March 9th, 1944. So we were very close in age. We were both Pisces. And I think that fits because I think Bobby Fischer, he was so unpredictable. It was like he was a fish, like a Pisces, going in 2 different directions. At the same time, he said he wanted to be the world chess championship. He avoided for many years, he avoided all the tournaments and things that would take him to that level. When people asked him why he did that, he just said, I don't want to do it. It was just hard to understand where he's coming from. So we got the age. We were also both New Yorkers. He was born in Chicago, but moved to Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, and grew up there. Bensonhurst, I think, was a working man's neighborhood, Italian and Jewish. And I grew up in the Bronx. So we were cross town to some extent. Another difference we had, another similarity we had, we both had communists in our family background. My father particularly was a strong communist, so was my uncles and aunts. And Bobby Fischer's mother was a communist. And so I think we have that in common. The other thing we have in common was that we were both Jewish. Bobby Fischer became known, and we talked about it. He became very openly anti-Semitic. And many people at different stages try to talk to him about it. Chess is a game that's played, has a large Jewish participation. And a lot of the grandmasters were Jewish, and Bobby would say these things to them, and they would be upset, and they're trying to get him to tone down his anti-Semitism. This anti-Semitism, rather than being slowed down as he got older and older, he said more and more outrageous Jewish things. And they really put him outside the Jewish community because he was seen as a nutcase. There are, of course, many Jews who are self-haters, but for me, the whole thing comes back to that communism. I grew up in a household where religion was the opium of the people. So I'm sure he heard from his family that Judaism is terrible and unethical, and he took it very personally, very literally. And so his whole life he had this anti-Semitic. His family was stunned by it. They weren't religious at all, but they were stunned by the animosity he had towards Judaism. Later in life, he developed a lot of animosity towards America. He became an exile. America, we'll go into the facts later, but America basically didn't want him in the country anymore. And he went from a hero, because he won the World Chess Championship from the Russians. He went from a hero to a traitor, and he died, and never being allowed back in the country. There was some rumors to say that he snuck back to the country when his mother died, and he wanted to come to a funeral. But whether that really happened or not, I don't know. So we're talking about the similarities, I had with Bobby Fischer, and so the communism was one, the Jewishness was one. Also, he was like a poor little kid. He lived with his mother. I don't think he ever met his father. I'm not even sure if his mother knew who the father was, but he lived with his mother and his older sister. When he was 6 years old, his sister went down the stairs to a shop and bought a chess set. And she and Bobby Fischer read the rules, and he began to learn to play chess. This was a godsend for him, because he was stuck in his house all day. His mother worked as a nurse, and he had a sister who was a few years older. And his mother wanted him to stay in the house because it was safer, and he just sat in the house. Once he got this chess set, it just changed his whole life. So at 8 years old, he would walk to the Brooklyn Chess Club. It probably was a pretty sophisticated group with very good players, being in New York City, but chess maybe was more popular than, in rural America. And they would see this poor little lost kid who would come in always with corduroy pants, and everyone felt sorry for him. He was this kid without no father brought him in, no mother brought him in. He would come in alone. In a few years, of course, he would be able to beat everyone in the club because he was a child prodigy. He was a genius, and chess became his ticket, even in high school. I don't even know if he graduated high school. I remember reading a Times magazine about how he would sit in class with chess books. The teacher said, "Put that down, learn math, this," and he would say, "No, I'm going to be the world chess champion someday." And he was so devoted to this, and he meant it, and he did it. Most chess players will admit that they are kind of odd. Chess playing brings out the strangeness of people, the competitiveness, everything. I, for one, am consumed by chess. Every day, I look at a chess book. Every day I'll get on the computer and play a game that was played 100 years ago by world chess champions. So the average chess player is consumed by chess. It's considered natural to just, learn different openings. The Milwaukee Library probably has 300 or 400 books on chess. On the other hand, if you take something like Mahjong, which I play, my wife taught me to play Mahjong, it's a nice game. When I looked in the library, there was one book by Mahjong. But with chess, you can take out books on how to play this opening, how to play that opening. Then there are books on the middle game, how to attack. Then you have these books on the end game. The end game is very subtle, and it's very hard to learn the subtleties of the end game. A story that I heard about Bobby Fischer with the end game was you usually can tell a chess prodigy not by their attacking, but by their end game, because the end game is so subtle that usually most people learn it over years and years by playing and playing and being in different positions. To have a natural feeling for the end game is very, very unusual. And Bobby Fischer was a sensational endgame player. Even as a young kid, he was a rarity. So when Bobby Fischer played this endgame against this grandmaster, and he wasn't happy with his results. I don't know if he lost the game or he couldn't win a game, but he shut himself in a room for 2 weeks, and he played all the end games with rooks and pawns. He went over all the end games by the great end game players, the Rubinsteins and the Capablancas. And 2 weeks later, when he came out, he said to his friends, "I'm now the greatest end game player alive." And he was right. He just had such a commitment to chess that nobody ever had that narrowness. Most of the chess players, even the world champions, always had an occupation. Some of them, one was an opera star, Smyslov. Botvinnik was an engineer. Tal was a reporter. But Bobby Fischer, since a little kid, I'm a chess player. It was rare because in America, nobody could earn a living by playing chess. In Europe, it was a different story. And that's what I want to do now, is compare America with what was going on in the rest of the world with chess. Maybe I should start first by saying a little bit about the history of chess. Chess is a game that probably is, 5,000 years old or something. It's played all over the world. When they have the World Chess Championship matches, they got players from Mongolia, and they got players from all over the world who play. The current World Chess Champion is Chinese. Before him, it was a Norwegian. So the whole world plays chess, and it's monitored by a group called FIDE that makes sure that every few years there's a World Chess Championship. In America, Bobby Fischer was very poor. He lived, once he grew up, he lived in like a one-room apartment, and he would stay up all night studying chess. That was his habit for many, many years, to stay up and play chess. The Russians, on the other hand, after the Russian Revolution, they came to chess to show that their system, the communist system, was superior to the West, and they dominated chess for generations. Every world champion for many, many years was Russian. And the Russians had schools for chess. Their grandmasters were given better apartments than other people. Grandmasters were allowed to go to France and London to play in tournaments or travel. Was a great benefit to the chess masters. Well, in America, there were very few grandmasters and everybody was very poor. These days, there's more corporate sponsorship of chess, and maybe you can do a little better financially. So what this came down to, I should also mention that many people think that the Russian, their chess organization decided who they wanted as a chess championship. They didn't want any Jews or non-communists, so they always picked their own man. They wanted somebody who was going to work with the Communist Party and work with them. So what we have here is Bobby Fischer by himself, by his own efforts, no money, no subsidy from the government. Even when he was 15 years old, he wanted to play in some tournaments. For an American to be considered a good chess player, you had to go to Europe. Just like artists, most artists in America went to Europe to study. So Bobby Fischer had to go to Europe, and his mother saw her 15-year-old son heading out to Bulgaria or something for a chess tournament, and then she actually would raise money for her son because there was no sponsorship, and she would raise money, and then she would write a letter to the director of the tournament, saying, "Please watch my son. He's just a young boy. He has very little experience in the world. Please take care of him." So here this young kid from Brooklyn is going off all over the world playing in these chess matches. So when it came down to, as we got close to the World Chess Championship, it was like Gary Cooper in high noon. Here's Bobby Fischer all alone, ready to play for the World Chess Championship, and he runs into this Russian chess machine. They had 7, 8 World Chess champions to help their contender. The Russians would all get together. They made a book on Bobby Fischer. When Bobby Fischer was about 12, 13 years old, he played a game of chess in a tournament, and the game was considered magnificent. At that time, there were columns in newspapers for chess. I remember those days. The New York Times had one, and the columnist, wrote that Bobby Fischer's game was the game of the century, best game he's seen, and the Russians got it. This was sent to Russia. All the Russians knew about the game, and they said, in 6, 7 years, we're going to have a contender for the throne and maybe overthrow the Russian thing. So they began to get information and ask the grandmasters what they thought and how can they stop Bobby Fischer, what are his weaknesses, what are this. So every Soviet grandmaster wrote what they thought his weaknesses are and how you should play against Bobby Fischer to win. And one chess player, his name's Korchnoi, he said, write anything you want, do anything you want, but Bobby Fischer will crush any of our masters. And then that was almost like a prophet. That's what happened. Bobby Fischer just was better than anyone. And he did win the World Chess Championship. In terms of character, most tournament directors hated Bobby Fischer. He was very brash, and he would argue. He was like a diva, like an opera. He couldn't stand any noise. And when Bobby Fischer played in tournaments, hundreds of people would go. In Europe, he was like a hero. In Europe, if he took a train, he'd be surrounded. He took a train in Yugoslavia, and somebody recognized him, and the whole train came up to him to get his autograph and to talk to him, because in Yugoslavia, chess was, a very big game. But in America, it wasn't. Let's see where I was going with that. So Bobby Fischer had landed up playing in the championship, and he played a guy by the name of Boris Spassky. Boris Spassky was a Russian, and he was very cosmopolitan. He was pretty much he wasn't a party line sort of guy. And Bobby Fischer didn't show up for the tournament. It was to be played in Iceland, 1972, World Chess Championship. And the story which I like so much about this is Bobby Fischer was supposed to be there the day before the tournament. They have like a big gala and they toast the players and wish them well. And Bobby Fischer was home. So Henry Kissinger, Secretary of State, a German by birth, was a very big chess player. He loved chess. So he was sitting in the Oval Office with President Nixon. And Kissinger said, I don't know what's wrong. That this kid is supposed to be playing this World Chess Championship. He's going to beat the crap out of these Russians. He'll be the greatest hero in the West. Why isn't he there? So Nixon says, let's call him. So Bobby Fischer answers the phone, and to his surprise, the Secretary of State's on the phone. He says, Bobby, aren't you supposed to be in Iceland? And Fischer, in his usual sort of bizarre way, said, no, I don't want to go. So Kissinger said, why not? You can beat this guy. Fischer says, yeah, I know. He says, why don't you want to go? And then Fischer reveals his true feelings about it and says, they will kill me. And he says, what do you mean they'll kill you? He said, the Russians will kill me before they will let anyone become world chess champion. So Kissinger said, how are they going to kill you, Bobby? And he said, they're going to have my plane shot down. So Kissinger says to Bobby, you tell me what time that plane's going to take off, and I assure you American fighter jets will escort you to Reykjavik, or however you say the city in Iceland. And that's what happened. Bobby Fischer went to Iceland thinking that American jets were on the tail, safeguarding him. When I tell the story to some of my chess players, I'm always stunned because I tell the story to show how crazy he was. And they say, yeah, the Russians probably would have shot him down. So, what's one person's paranoia is another person's reality. And so that always amazing. I want to tell another, I got two little stories before I forget. One story is that I said earlier that Bobby Fischer always had men who sort of filled in for his dad or tried to. So there was a tournament in South America, Buenos Aires, and Bobby Fischer went down there with 3 other Americans and played in a tournament with like 20 South American players. And this one American grandmaster, Larry Evans, who was close to Fischer, said, Bobby, you never shown any interest in women. How would you like to have a go at it? And it was true that I think unless you were able to talk chess to Bobby Fischer, he had absolutely nothing to say to you. He was on TV a few times, and before he went on, they told him to read like a Time magazine or something, so he knew what was happening in the world, because he was ignorant of everything. The only thing that mattered to him was playing chess. So Larry Evans fixes him up with a prostitute in Buenos Aires, and for 2-3 days, Bobby Fischer loses the chess games. So when Larry Evans later asked him what he thought of his experience, he said, sex is okay, but chess is better. Yeah, that was one of the stories, and I wanted to make sure I got it. The other story I wanted to talk about was during the chess match with Spassky on the 6th game, Fischer played a queen pawn opening they called the Queen Gambit, and that was a wonderful series if people saw that. He played the Queen Gambit opening he never played before, and surprisingly he got a wonderful game, and he pushed Spassky and won just a beautiful game. And at the end of the game, Spassky knocks over his king with his, which is a traditional way of resigning in chess. The king is dead. You knock it over, you lose. And Spassky stood up over Fischer. I would have thought he wanted to punch Fischer, but he stood up above Fischer and he just applauded him. Fischer was stunned. You know, he lived in this ultra competitive world, and here's this guy applauding him. He just got up, didn't say a word, and ran to his room. This level of sportsmanship is unbeknown to a person like Fischer, who everything was winning. Even the style, even during the World Chess Competition, was people kept on saying it seems like he's playing a cat and mouse game. He didn't just want to beat someone; he wanted to humiliate them. He wanted to show his superiority, and people could feel that. But people had to sit down and play Fischer. There was a visceral reaction, you know, a fear, and he did win the chess championship rather easily. And he came home to America, and he could have anything he wanted. He was a cultural hero. He beat the Russians. He was on TV, a few shows. I saw one with Bob Hope and Johnny Carson. And Bobby Fischer was just charming and quick-witted, and you know, played the part of the hero. Well, that was the apex. That's Bobby Fischer on top of the world. What happened after that was Bobby Fischer never played another chess game there. So after 2-3 years of not playing, the FIDE, the World Chess Championship Committee, they took the championship away from him and gave it to a guy by the name of Karpov, another Russian, and told Fischer he wasn't champion anymore. Fischer still considered himself the champion, and this guy Karpov just a pretender. Why Fischer never played again, no one really knows. Fischer argued with the FIDE that he wanted the rules to change to give him more advantage if he played a challenger. And of course, everyone realized that no, he was just looking for, you know, more of an advantage. And they refused to do that, and they took the championship away from him. And for 20 years, he just lived as a hermit, lived in his room, stayed up all night, studied chess, was poor, and nobody could see why he didn't play. Didn't play in any tournaments, he didn't play in any championship rounds. So 20 years later, I'm not sure quite who arranged it, but they arranged another match between Spassky and Fischer. Spassky was one of the few players that Fischer liked. He realized that he was anti-Russian, you know, and the two of them had a nice camaraderie. So they go to Yugoslavia and they play a match. This Fischer hadn't played in, you know, 20 years. And and not surprisingly, Fischer wins the match just like he won the first match. He's just much better than Spassky. And when the match ended, Fischer was ready to come home, and they told him that he was playing in Yugoslavia, which was a war zone. And they said, you can't go back to America. America doesn't want you. So here he went from being a great Cold War hero to being an exile. He never lived in America after that. He lived in different countries for a few years. He lived in the Philippines, where supposedly he picked up a wife. But he landed up going back to Iceland. Iceland was one of the only countries that would have him. And for Iceland, that was a wonderful historical event for them to be able to host the World Chess Championship. People in Iceland tried to reach out to Fischer and be friendly to him, but all they ever got from him was anti-American rants and anti-Semitism. And he died a lonely guy due to kidney disease. and never went to a doctor, and died a lonely man and an exile from his country. So does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Do you think was a tipping point for Bobby Fischer in terms of descending into madness?
I think it was there from his youth, even just the isolation. I remember my own family, the communism, we always closed the windows. We didn't want people to see us, that maybe we're doing that. I think he was born in isolation and died isolated. But when I see pictures of him when he was older, he was just ravaged by mental illness. He had a rough go. Anybody else? Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Did you say he got a what? He got married in the Philippines? What happened?
Yeah, he had a woman and a child. They claimed was his child and his wife. I don't know whether it was his child or not, but he never really showed any interest in getting married or anything like that. So it's hard to know. Next.
Yeah. So he was in exile when his mom passed, right?
Yeah.
Was he financially supporting her at that point, or was she just kind of on her own? Like,
Well, I really don't know the answer. At times Bobby Fischer had access to lots of money. Even the chess match against Spassky, the second one, 1992, some millionaire, I think, offered Fischer and Spassky, $3 million to play. So he certainly had a few $1 million, even though he lived like a poor hermit. He certainly had money. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
How old was he when he first became world champion?
He was born in 1940, and the world championship was 72. So I guess that's 32. Yeah, 32 years old, which is young.
Can you explain to us non-chess players why or how he was so brilliant, some of his moves or something like that?
Yeah, first let me say, chess players, there's a range of how they see themselves. Bobby Fischer always saw himself as, I make the best move on the board. He was objective. He saw the best move. Some chess players, there's a guy named Laska who said, I played the man. I'm like a psychologist. If I know this guy won't attack, then I'll provoke him because I know he's afraid to attack. So Bobby Fischer always looked for the best moves. Chess players see chess as an art form. And maybe I should ask some of the chess players here. Yeah, I can say, what is your favorite Bobby chess game? And they'll say, oh, the game he played in 1968 with so and so. You can put it on, even I think on some movies like James Bond, they'll have a picture of a position on the chessboard on the cake. It would be I'll say, oh, that's Bobby Fischer, 1986. So chess players view this as greatly aesthetic. My favorite Bobby Fischer game is a game he played against a Danish guy. What's his name?
Ben Larson.
Ben Larson. Thank you, Adam. And he allowed his opponent to surround his king, and then Bobby Fischer gave up his queen. Usually you give up the queen only if you're going to checkmate your opponent. He gave up his queen to stop checkmate, and then won a brilliant endgame with a passed pawn. I just looked at that and said, that's unbelievable. How can a human being come up with that? And my son, who is not he plays chess, but he doesn't play with people because it's too tension producing. He plays that game out every year and says he's stunned how magnificent it is. You just feel like you just want to applaud. It's like a performance, a beautiful performance. I want to say one other thing about sort of what you said. Why didn't Bobby Fischer ever defend his chess crown? Why did he stop? Well, in most chess books will say that Bobby Fischer was like Alexander the Great. He conquered the world. He said, there's nothing more for me to do. I'm better than everybody, that's it. Close up the chest, I'm going home. I don't believe it was anything like that. I think chess players have a terrible fear of losing. And one of the reasons in the nature of chess, my wife said, Donnie, what do you like about Mahjong?
I like the challenge.
Okay. What percent of Mahjong would you say is luck and what percent is skill?
I would say, well, I'm not very good on everything, but probably about 60% is you gotta get the right titles.
Yeah.
And then 40% is you get brain.
So 60% of Mahjong is luck. When you play cards, sometimes you have a game and you get a joker. You say, oh, I got a joker, okay, we'll win the game. In chess, there's no luck. If you're in a lousy position, you put yourself there. And what's the answer? You get yourself out of this position. You fight back. You make a game of it. When you lose a game of chess, it's a terrible blow to people's ego. It hurts. You spend 5-6 hours on this game, and you make one little slip, you lose a little concentration, and you make a little slip, the game is gone. And it hurts. And I would say that most people who don't play chess, somebody came up to me earlier before I started and said, it's just too much to go through. It's a blow. When you lose in a chess game, you feel that, you've done badly. And so I think even though Bobby Fischer maybe was a couple of levels above all the other chess players, the idea to go through another chess match, the World Chess Championship, with the possibility of losing, I think it was just too much for him. Yes, Nick. Oh, sorry.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
I'm a very novice chess player.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't consider myself a chess player,
Okay.
but going back to your comments that some players play the game, they play the pieces, they play the board.
Yeah.
Others play the man.
Yeah.
They read the person's psychology.
Yeah.
I'm a retired psychoanalyst, and I'm wondering, with all that's being written about AI, the game that we played against Big Blue, how much of it is psychology and how much of it is actually intelligence playing the moves?
Yeah.
In other words, can psychology best Big Blue or whatever the current iteration of AI would be?
Yeah, I don't know that much about AI at all, but I'll say this, that following Bobby Fischer, a few years down the road, there was a world champion, his name was Kasparov. And he was famous because he was an attacking, exciting player. That's what the fans like when you have a world championship, a real fighter. And whenever he played the computers, he did very badly. The computers were better than everyone, of course. But the reason why he did badly was that when he played people, he was able to bully people and bluff people and say, okay, I'm going to attack you over here. People say, oh no, here comes Castle. The computer didn't have any of those feelings at all. And the computer just wiped them off the map. So Fischer would say that he didn't play the man, he made the best moves. That's what he would say.
Have you ever played somebody who was much better than you? And if you did, were you devastated when you lost?
No, but I remember playing a guy who was an international master who was much better than me, and I had him in I had a pretty good position against him, and I sort of lost. I sort of lost my direction, lost the game, and afterwards I just. How did I let this one get away? Yeah, this.
Does your devotion to chess make you happy?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. There's a famous quote by one of the grandmasters, whose name was Tarash. He says, "Playing chess makes men happy, makes man happy, men and women." Otherwise, the whole thing would be crazy. I mean, it's just misery. But people are just happy playing chess. There's a chess. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely.
Bill loves to play chess, so he plays whenever he gets a chance.
Bob really loves beating me.
That's one of my similarities with Bobby Fischer. Anybody else? Okay, thank you everyone for coming.